Good evening and welcome to the 2021 book study with author Stephanie Humphrey. I am so excited to join you on tonight to read a few bits of excerpts. I want to say a few bits of excerpts because it's going to be really short tonight, but I'm excited to read a little bit to you from my book, Meant to Be, the story of Alexander and Sydney. Y'all know I say this every single month. This is August, so it's the 8th month. Y'all know exactly what I'm going to say. This is one of my favorite books. I love this book for so many reasons. Again, it's the story of Alexander and Sydney. And one of the reasons why I love this book so much is because it has a surprise ending to it. I think the ending may not be a surprise, but the letter that I added to the book maybe about a year or so ago, to me is really surprising. So there is a letter that is being released. As you purchase the book and read the story, you'll be able to see. And it's a flashback to one of the characters' younger life. And it is interesting, y'all. Like, oh my gosh, you will love it. And I want to read it to you tonight so bad, but I want you to get the book so you can read it for yourself, okay? So this is what I'm reading tonight. Before I get there, I want to show you my latest release. This is the Gifts of Love series. You all know I have the Gifts of Love series. This is the Gifts of Love book entitled Love. So it combines the book, Walking Out Our Love, and A Return to Love, the story of Robert and Sabrina. So Walking Out Our Love and A Return to Love are two books that I recently released, actually this year in 2021. And I decided to combine them because they're both talking about love. So I decided to add this book to the Gifts of Love series and entitle it Love, because Walking Out Our Love, A Return to Love. This is the fifth and last, as far as I know, book in the Gifts of Love series. So get you a copy. That way you'll have both of my recently released books in one book. And I love the cover. Don't you all love this? Is the Gifts of Love. This is a gift to you. Love, it truly is a gift, y'all. Like, if you find someone to love you, to be in love with you, to care about you, to see your strengths and your weaknesses and love you and care for you and take care of you and support you and encourage you, that's amazing. Love is such a gift. And so I thank God for the gift of love tonight. I thank God for his love. I thank God for romantic love. I thank God for family love, for friend love, for even coworker love, because you all, I am learning to love my coworkers, just like we share our heart and share our thoughts and our lives with each other. And it's just such a great atmosphere to be in at work. So I love love. And so I'm excited to share that with you on tonight. I am actually adding something to the chat, so give me just a minute. We're going to get right into our book study tonight. So I'm saying for my podcast, I'm saying welcome to the 2021 book study with author Stephanie Humphrey. Don't forget to post your questions and comments. All right, so let's get right in. So I'm going to start with chapter 1 because I feel like it's important for me to lay this foundation so that you will know the beginnings of Alexander and Sydney's relationship. Alexander White slowly set his drink down on the table. His eyes perused the beauty who entered his colleague's establishment. She wore a red fitted dress, her small waist accentuated with a thin black belt. Her long, shapely legs rested in a pair of black pumps. Her full red lips and big curly afro were her boldest features. And her almond-shaped eyes and thin nose completed the look. This woman was simply elegant, and the class exuding from her was attractive. Surely she was not here for the night's festivities. She appeared too sophisticated for it. Her eyes scanned the room before she settled on a seat at the bar. Sydney Alexander took a deep breath. She could do this. She needed the money, so she could do this. She smoothly turned her chair around and smiled at the crowd. Many couples were already connecting, but she realized a few gentlemen met her eye. Great. She turned back around and waited, and not for long. Good evening, a deep baritone addressed her. Sydney glanced up to match the face. Smooth, dark skin, bald head, goatee, very handsome. Good evening, Sydney replied. I actually wrote Sydney answered. Would you like a drink? His deep, rich voice cascaded between. Iced tea, please. Sydney smiled at him. What about a Shirley Temple? The man suggested. No, thank you. Sydney held firm. Would you like another alcoholic drink? He raised an eyebrow at her. Perhaps a glass of wine? No, thank you. Iced tea will be fine. Are you a square? The man's tone suddenly changed. No, I'm safe. Oh, well, it was nice to meet you. He darted away. You too, Sydney watched as the man made his way to a woman with a clingy yellow dress that exposed more of her breasts than it covered. Sydney shook her head. Maybe this is what the men there were looking for. She waved the bartender over and ordered her tea. It wasn't long before another gentleman approached her that didn't mind her fate. Alexander monitored every man who interacted with the woman. A few sat and stayed for a while, but each eventually moved on to another woman dressed, well, appropriate for the occasion. I actually wrote for the evening. I'm adding words as I'm going. 7 men, and none of them made a connection with her? Was she a hard case? Not one who would go for just anything, or anyone for that matter. Could he measure up to her possible impossible standards? Her possibly impossible standards. Halfway through the evening, Sydney transitioned to a booth. It was wonderful to meet all the men who joined her, but none of them struck her fancy. Some of them just wanted a sex buddy or were predators looking for easy prey. Yet some men were there for true companionship, and those were the ones who hung in the longest. But no compatibility, not even for a temporary relationship. What do y'all think she's involved in? What do y'all think Sydney's involved in? Add it to the chat or add it to the comment. Oh well, the night wasn't a total loss. She did meet a few that didn't mind enjoying great conversation with someone of the opposite sex. No strings attached. That was worth the trip. As for potential donor, maybe she would find one on a future date. Did y'all hear what I said? A potential donor. Okay. She drank the last of her peach tea, stood, and smoothed her dress. Her eyes moved around the room one last time before she confidently strolled to the door to meet with her friends. How was it? Gary inquired. Not bad, but no potentials. I will go to a few of the upcoming events and see if I make a connection then. Of course you will. You're hot stuff, sexy thing, George added as she tapped her friend's hip. Sydney loved her roommates, Georgette. She always got a kick of people thinking she was a dude. She was as tough as one, but you wouldn't know it looking at her. George was gorgeous and had the body of a centerfold model, curves in all the right places. Her red curly hair hung down her back, and her green eyes held a softness that made any guy swoon. But the sweet sexiness changed once she opened her mouth, especially if she didn't care for you. It was like venom spewing from a snake's mouth. Sydney had more than once told Georgette that she needed to tame that tongue of hers. Oh my Lord, who do y'all think she's modeled after? Even Gary, her boyfriend of 8 months, had to address Georgette's mouth on more than one occasion. Sydney smiled at Gary and shook her head. She loved Gary. They had become fast friends, volunteering at the homeless shelter together. As soon as Sydney met him, she was sure he was a good fit for her outspoken roommate. Gary was a 6 foot, 250-pound man of pure muscle. And with deep blue eyes and jet black hair, he was the epitome of a hunk. His dad had been in the military, so exercise and weightlifting were a part of the family's daily regimen. He used his girth and intimidating demeanor as a bouncer on most weekends. Gary needed to be tough, considering the situations he found himself in with George. All in all, Sydney was thankful to have friends like Gary and George. She was chatting with them when George suddenly pulled her into Lance's bistro. Alexander quickly pulled out his wallet. She was leaving and he couldn't miss her. He left money on the table and moved behind her. He froze when he saw her with another guy and girl. Smart to have friends waiting in case something went south. He suddenly found his phone very interesting as he monitored their next move. He casually glanced past the trio for the third time. Did the redhead with the classy lady just smirk at him? Alexander watched Miss Redhead pull Miss Classy Lady into Lancet. He quickly followed. There were a couple ahead of him waiting for the maitre d' to seat them. He asked for a table in view of the trio. A few minutes passed when he saw the redhead and the guy move away from the table. She walked up to him and snapped his picture. If you hurt her, I will cut up your body in tiny pieces and scatter them around the city. Have a nice night. The man behind her simply shook his head and followed her out. So in case you didn't pick up, that was Georgette speaking to Alexander. Alexander quickly glanced at the classy lady. Her eyes went up and down the menu, and then she froze and placed it on the table. Sydney wondered why her friends suddenly needed to go to the record store. They said they would go while they waited for their food, but they hadn't even ordered. Sydney froze. Someone was watching her. She gingerly placed her menu on the table and smiled. Her eyes went around the room. A gentleman in a dark suit sat several tables away, phone in hand. but she got the distinct impression that his phone was not his interest. She waited. He slowly looked up at her and smiled, and half smiled. Sydney took a deep breath. Blue eyes stared back at her. His dark hair was slicked back on his head, and the cleft in his chin twitched slightly. He was handsome, and for some reason, she could not take her eyes off him. His steady gaze made her stomach flip-flop. Was he at the bar? Had he followed her there? Was she in danger? Wait a minute. Didn't George stop and talk with him? Maybe they knew each other. Alexander shifted in his chair. He let out a slow breath, thankful she broke contact first. He waited a few minutes before he made his move. May I join you? Sydney glanced up at the handsome stranger. She extended her hand for him to sit across from her. Thank you. He didn't take his eyes off her. Man, she was pretty. You're welcome. Do you know my friends? I saw them speaking with you. Alexander laughed nervously. No, your friend, the lady, told me in no uncertain terms to be on my best behavior. Sydney held her hand over her mouth. Oh no, what did she say? That she would scatter my sliced up body parts across the city if I mistreated you? Sydney could not help but laugh. I am so sorry. She is, well, she has had some not so great experiences with men, and she is cautious with me when it comes to them. She is technically harmless as long as me or her boyfriend are around. So don't catch her in a dark alley, Alexander concluded, raising an eyebrow. Something like that. I am Sydney, by the way. Alexander. He took her hand. Sydney held her breath as the stranger enveloped her hand in his. His hands were soft, yet strong, and much larger than hers. I would love to have my hand back. Oh, I thought I was doing just fine right here. He hesitated to let her go. Steadying his eyes on her as he prepared his next words. In an effort not to sound like a stalker, I followed you here from the bar. Alexander lowered his voice as he spoke. I thought I saw you there, just briefly. Why didn't you come over then? Alexander became noticeably uncomfortable. I usually don't participate. A friend hosts these events. Well, he's more of a colleague. Either way, I come sometimes when I'm not busy. I think more out of curiosity now, especially since I've never made a serious connection. He sighed. So, you met someone? Yes, early last year. It lasted about 6 months. She was demanding and caused more stress in my life than joy. So we went our separate ways. Sydney couldn't help but smile. He returned one of his own. I'm glad that humors you. He took a sip from the glass of water the waitress brought over. I'm not humored, just glad, I guess. Honest, Alexander liked that in a woman. Me too. Would you like to order? Sydney chuckled. Yes, she grinned as she perused the menu. Alexander eyed her curiously, noticing the play of emotions highlighting her beautiful features. What? Sydney contemplated telling her secret. Yeah, I had it right. Oh well, if Victoria could tell hers. I ate a salad before I went to the bar in case I needed to tell a gentleman I had eaten, but a meal light enough to accept a dinner invitation if asked. Smart. You women are like that. It's a great way to protect yourself. More women should do that. Alexander's eyes glazed over for a moment. Thank you for accepting mine, the dinner invitation. I didn't. I was already here, Alexander. Well, Sydney, will you accept it now? Will you have dinner with me this evening? Sydney chuckled. Of course. They ordered their meal and got to know each other. Alexander was a second year law student. He grew up in the area, and while his parents lived just 30 minutes away, he chose to have his own space while finishing school. He rented the home of a gentleman from his neighborhood for a nominal fee. It was fully furnished with utilities included, and there were 6 more like it. Alexander spoke well of the gentleman, and Sydney could tell Alexander deeply admired him. Alexander was also the son of Charles White, one of the founders of White and Van law firm. Oh, excuse me, the founders of White and Van, period. A law firm representing the wealthy. No wonder Alexander could afford a solution to her problem. Have you all guessed what her problem might be? And have you guessed what the solution might be? If you have any thoughts, go ahead and drop it in the chat, or if you're listening to the rebroadcast, drop it in the comment section. I'm curious to know what you think her problem is and how he can help her solve it. Sydney was surprised to learn he had high ambitions, including the highest office in the land. The presidency? Wow, Alexander, that's amazing. You can do it. You're well equipped. Alexander tried not to blush. He had only been sitting with this woman for 40 minutes, and she made him feel 10 feet tall. He listened intently when it was her turn to share herself with him. She was a secondary education major in her junior year. She wanted to teach high school science and eventually work in the school's district office. Her sights were set on school superintendent and eventually the United States Secretary of Education. Alexander's eyes softened as he learned Sydney's parents had passed away from a drunk driver 6 years ago. She stayed with her aunt, who had been diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago. They found the lumps early enough for treatment, but the cancer had returned this year. They were working through it day by day. As for the evening, Sydney had accepted the invitation to the bar because she needed the money. Alexander stilled, waiting for her to share more, but she didn't. Maybe it was too painful. He wished he could do something to ease the worry creasing her face, but he simply leaned forward to remind her of his presence. Sydney was thankful for the gesture. She finished her life story halfway through their meal when the conversation switched to college life. Sydney had never had this much fun with the man. She genuinely enjoyed their interaction. Alexander was so easy to talk to and sincere, a rarity in the men she met, which I can understand because she, college student. Alexander did not want the evening to end. He wondered how he could spend the rest of it with her. Maybe she wanted dessert. Alexander inwardly sighed as Sydney declined the offer. He would have to get her number. Maybe they could get together again and soon. He paid the bill and they stood to leave. Alexander, Sydney spoke quietly. Yes. He was close enough to peer into her light brown eyes. Golden flecks stared back at him. Her smooth mocha skin beckoned his touch, but he kept his hands to himself. My friends and I are going to the all-night outdoor movies in the park. Would you like to come? He didn't know the park offered all-night movies, but he silently thanked them for it. I would. Great. He watched Sydney tap her phone, then followed her to the sidewalk. She waved to someone in the distance. Am I safe? Alexander whispered, noticing George walking their way. Sydney chuckled. I will make sure she knows you are a perfect gentleman. I appreciate that. Alexander, may I introduce my crazy roommate, Georgette Sinclair, and the man who's chosen to love her, Gary Bryant. Nice to make your acquaintance, Alexander eyed Georgette, but extended his hand to Gary. The pleasure is all ours, man. Gary shook Alexander's hand while George stood with her hands on her hips. She circled Alexander. I guess he will do, but the threat I made earlier still stands. Indefinitely. I will keep that in mind, Miss Georgette. George. Miss George. Alexander extended his hand. When George placed hers in his, he kissed it. George glanced at her hand and then at Gary. And then at Alexander. She shifted on her heels and glared at Gary. You've never kissed my hand before. Gary rolled his eyes as he grabbed Georgette by the waist. Come on, you forgot the blankets. George fussed with Gary, but winked at Sydney. I think you won her over, Sydney turned her attention to Alexander. I hope so. I need my body to fulfill my dreams. Sydney chuckled. Yes, you do. Alexander extended his arm to Sydney, and they followed George and Gary to Cree's campus corner. Christopher decided to purchase dress-down clothes at the suggestion of Sydney. She had brought some along and wanted Christopher to be comfortable. Oh, you know what? This is supposed to be Alexander. This was some of my typos. So Alexander decided to purchase dress-down clothes at the suggestion of Sydney. She had brought some along and wanted Alexander to be comfortable. Once they changed and Gary purchased their blankets, the quartet strolled to the park. The corrections have already been made on this. This is the old copy. All right, so Alexander helped Gary spread out the blankets while Sydney and Georgette spread out the snacks. Alexander settled close to Sydney, thankful she did not move away. They focused on Harry Belafonte and Dorothy Dandridge interacting on the screen. Carmen was one of Sydney's favorite movies. She was delighted that Alexander had seen it with his mom in his youth. Casablanca followed, along with The King and I and Rebel Without a Cause. By the time Guess Who's Coming to Dinner showed, Georgette was snoring and Sydney was close. Alexander bundled a spare blanket together, laid it on his lap, and motioned Sydney to lie down. She did. He was thankful she trusted him. Gary grinned, giving Alexander a thumbs up. Is that what guys do? Like, all right. Alexander appreciated the support. He glanced at Sydney before settling his eyes on Sydney Poitier. Once the credits rolled across the screen, the announcement came over the intercom that the movie showing was over. Alexander glanced at his watch. It was 6:30 a.m. He had never spent all night with a woman like this, and he still did not want to let her go. The quartet folded their blankets and walked to the parking lot. Before Sydney slipped into Gary's truck, Alexander pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "I would like to make an arrangement with you. May I call you about it?" Sydney closed the door and walked him to the back of the truck. "Is that all you want?" "I want to get to know you without it, but, well, I need the money." Sydney could not deny it. Ever since her aunt's cancer returned, she'd been too weak to work. That left a financial burden on Sydney, and she would not let her aunt down. Sydney inwardly sighed. "Yes, you can call me." Alexander punched his passcode into his phone. "Here you are." Sydney saved her number and handed him the device, along with a kiss on the cheek. "Thank you." "You're welcome. I will talk with you soon." And that is the end of chapter 1 of the story Meant to Be, the story of Alexander and Sydney. What do you all think so far? Like, what type of arrangement do you think Sydney and Alexander need to make with each other? She's talking about needing money. He's talking about wanting to make the arrangement. So what do you all think? Go ahead and add it to the chat or add it to the comment section if you're listening to the rebroadcast. And I'm going to get ready for the next section that I'm going to read. It is actually in chapter 2, a few pages into chapter 2. So I think this was a Sunday or a Saturday when they first met, or it could have been a Friday. I don't remember what it was. I don't even know if I said what night it was in the beginning of the chapter. But either way, this next part that I'm about to read happens on a Tuesday evening. So Alexander and Sydney met for the first time over the weekend. A couple of days have passed, and now we're up to the Tuesday after they initially met. So let's see what happens. Alexander was excited. Tuesday night had finally come. He glanced around the dimly lit room. The walls were tan and graced with African American artwork. A well-worn chocolate couch was pushed against the far wall, with a coffee table in front of it. Candles lined the long table that held the source of the melodic Miles Davis, permeating the atmosphere. He hadn't heard jazz since his brother left home. His dad hated the noise, as he called it, so Alexander had returned the albums to his brother. He almost forgot how the lyrical tone put him in a relaxed mood. He ran his hands along the turntable before flipping through the selection. "You have this?" He held up a Jackie McLean. Sydney cocked her head at him. "What do you know about it?" "My brother loves jazz. He played it around the house all the time, but Dad hated it. My brother didn't care. He inundated me with Mr. McLean, Thelonious Monk, George Coltrane. He took up saxophone in middle school and fell in love with it. He is a natural. He was in a jazz band in middle and high school, plays with a band locally and across the state. He plays like he was born with jazz in his blood, you know?" He grinned at her. "Well, of course you don't know, but I love to hear him play. He's amazing." "Maybe we can go hear him play sometime." Sydney was hopeful. "Of course, I am due for a trip to see him. Maybe spring break?" after we see how this goes. Was I that obvious? Yes, and it's okay. Sydney reassured him. He doubted that, but she did look sincere. I have a question I have been wanting to ask. While I love the music, the ambiance is left wanting. Why did you decide for us to meet here? My aunt's friend Albert owns the restaurant. I knew we could get good food and be alone. Why? It doesn't meet your million dollar taste? Alexander raised his eyebrow at her. My what? You heard me, Alexander. But I shouldn't have, Sydney. He lunged toward her. Sydney tried to get out of the way, but he grabbed her and started tickling. Okay, I was going to say something, but I'm going to keep moving. Sydney squealed with delight. He eased his hands away when Sydney started screaming. Oh my goodness, you are doubly sensitive. I am. I have been ticklish all my life. My dad and his brother used to gang up on me when I was younger. He grinned as he escorted her to the table. Though the decor was not what he was expecting, the table setting was that of a five-star restaurant, complete with a short white rose bouquet in the center. Are roses your favorite? I actually don't have a favorite. I like all flowers. Sydney paused to let him file that away. Are you ready to eat? Yes. Alexander pushed back from the table. I think you purposely fed me all this Southern food to persuade me to your side. Not at all, she winked at him. Would you like dessert? Maybe later. I am anxious to get started with the negotiating. Sydney appeared nervous as she pulled a contract from her purse. She sighed before handing it over. Alexander? He glanced at her from the document. There is something that I would like to share with you. Don't tell me you used to be a man. What? Alexander, no, no. I have never been. I am all woman, always have been, always will be. Sydney watched Alexander double over. She joined his contagious laughter. You are too much. So I've been told. Seriously, Sid, if you don't mind me calling you that. I don't. Alexander studied her face. What could be in the contract that caused her such unease? A hidden secret, perhaps? Let's just read through and address your concerns as we go. Alexander watched Sydney shift nervously in her chair. It can't be that bad. Let's just read through it. They moved through the first few sections with no changes, and then came the intimacy section. Sydney held her breath as he read through her words carefully. Excuse me, let me try that again. Sydney held her breath as he read through her carefully constructed words. Why are you still a virgin? He inquired. Because I was taught by my parents to preserve my virginity until I married. As I got older, I felt it was the best choice for me to maintain. Alexander studied Sydney's face carefully. He did not want to be disrespectful to her, but he had to know. So why are you willing to give me you now? Sydney stood from the chair and took a deep breath. She turned back to face him. Because I figured that a contract of this nature could not be agreed upon without it. Alexander sat back in his chair. He had never been without money, never had to struggle or decide to bargain his time or life for money. He knew women who did, and then men who gladly paid them. But Sydney was not like them. She was genuinely a good-hearted person. I'm not sure what her being a good-hearted person have to do with the other, but it's in there. Okay. Classy and sweet. Was there no other way for her? I know you said that your parents passed away, but do you have family or friends who can help you? Sydney tried not to get defensive. Don't you think I would have asked if I had family? My aunt is my last living relative. Well, there's her son, but he's currently incarcerated. I don't have friends with the kind of money I need. I pay for my aunt's house bills, medical bills, and my college education. My first 2 years of school, everything was good. I received a federal grant and a few local scholarships, and I used money from the education fund my parents started for me. But I had to dip into that money some from my, let me try that again. I had to dip into some of the money from my education to help my aunt when she was first diagnosed with cancer. She was out of work and it took too long, and it took a while before she was strong enough to start back. I worked after school and weekends to catch us up. The work helped me save the rest of my college fund, but it just wasn't enough to carry me all the way. Thankfully, we used resources offered through the American Cancer Society, and I was able to get work study. But all of my efforts have not been enough to fully manage all I'm responsible for. She hugged herself as if by sheer will she could dismiss her money problem. That is what she didn't tell him at the restaurant. She was the adult taking care of everything. And this arrangement was her last resort. Alexander wasn't sure what to do, so he did what he could. He scooped her into his arms. He scooped her into his arms. At first, she stood stiff in his embrace, but the more he rubbed her back, the more she relaxed. She eventually reached her arms around him and laid her head against her chest. Lay her head against his chest. He didn't realize she was crying until he felt moisture on his shirt. That's right, Sydney. You can trust me. I won't disappoint you. Not intentionally, anyway. I will learn to treasure you. He held her until she shifted away from him. Thank you. Sydney sat down and put her face in her hands. She sat still for so long, Alexander grew worried. He knelt in front of her and touched her hands. When she glanced up at him, Alexander recognized the look in her eyes. I can't go through with this. I should have never agreed to this meeting. I know this is not what God wants for me. It is not what I want for myself. I will wait for another way. God will make another way. He has to. Sydney stood. I'm sorry for bringing you here and for getting your hopes up. Alexander watched her move toward the door. He monitored her face, unsure why she was ready to dismiss him. He scoffed within himself. He wasn't going that easily. So that's it? He finally spoke. I don't want it to be, Alexander. I hadn't planned for this to happen. I allowed my doubts and desperation to overpower my faith, and I feel ashamed for that. I am embarrassed for even allowing it to get this far. I'm sorry. I'm not. I'm not sorry for any of it. Alexander walked over to her. I can't imagine how you keep it all together with all you're going through, or even what it took to make the decision to go to the bar, but I'm glad you did. He touched her elbow, pausing until she looked at him. Sydney, don't be hard on yourself. Please don't feel ashamed or embarrassed. let yourself off the hook. Alexander grabbed the contract. Do you remember when I said I want to get to know you without this? He tore the document in quarters. I still do. Sydney nodded and sat back down on the couch. Several minutes passed before he spoke again. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Several minutes passed before she spoke. Thank you. You're welcome. I need some time to move past this. Let's get to know each other as friends and then go from there. Is that okay? Sydney asked. Yes, that is perfect. Alexander let a few minutes pass before speaking. Would you consider staying with me? Stay with you? Sydney raised her eyebrow at him. To help save money. If you stay with me, then at least you can save on room and board. What y'all think about that? Drop it in the chat or the comment section. I would, but staying with a man who I am not married to is not ideal. Sydney shook her head. What y'all think about that? Would y'all stay with a man or a woman prior to the marriage? Or if you were just friends, would you stay with them as roommates? Or if you were dating, would you stay with them? Like, how do you all feel about cohabitating without a marriage license? Add it to the comment section or drop it in the chat. Or add it to the chat right now and drop it in the comment section. Okay. I understand that, but we could be roommates. The home I rent is set up for roommates. The second bedroom is down the hall and you would have your own bathroom. I wouldn't bother you, Sydney. I just want to help you. Sydney frowned at him. Well, if you don't bother me, how would we get to know each other? Alexander smiled. True, but I meant. Sydney grinned and touched his shoulder. I know what you meant, and I appreciate it. She stood. Stay with you. Let me talk this over with my inner circle, and I will get back with you. In the meantime, let's have dessert. Sydney exited the room and came back with a 3-layered double chocolate cake. Oh, ooh, my mouth is watering just thinking about that. Alexander's favorite dessert. She remembered. He took a bite. This is homemade. Yes, I made it this morning. It's delicious, Sid. He could get used to this. He studied Sydney's face and noticed she was more relaxed. He hoped he could keep her that way. Sydney breathed a sigh of relief. God, please forgive me and help me to make decisions based on my knowledge of you and your word. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Sydney and Alexander enjoyed the next hour discussing college life, relationships, and plans for the future. That is the end of chapter 2. I'm not going to get into chapter 3 or any of the chapters to come because I want you to purchase the book. This is meant to be the story of Alexander and Sydney. I am curious to know what, well, y'all know I already know, but I'm just speaking as if I don't know. So I'm curious to know, what do you think Sydney's decision is going to be? Do you think that she's going to stay with him? Or do you think that she'll just continue to stay with Georgette and wait for God to show himself strong on our behalf? Go ahead and add it to the comment section, or add it to the chat and add it to the comment section, because I'm curious to know what you think about it. So it's interesting that, you know, this idea actually, well, I won't share with you how the idea came about. Maybe if we talk individually, I can share with you how this idea came about. And I'm just going to leave that right there. Okay. So I'm going to answer a few questions in the chat. But before I do, I want to let you know that our next month's book in September, we're going to read only the beginning. So only the beginning is our September book. Let me give you a little bit of what this is about. I'm going to read you one of the quotes from the book. Lord, please help me not to be attracted to Stacy. What is wrong with me? I am not a predator. Please help me with this, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. What y'all think he's talking about? Let's find out. Christopher is a single parent to Brandon, Gracie, and Sophie. Stacy is a rising high school senior. Did y'all hear what I said? He has 3 children and she's a rising high school senior. Okay. And volunteers at her church's child development center. Christopher is instantly taken aback by Stacy's beauty, intelligence, and kindness. But as a man of faith, he feels guilty about his attraction for her. Stacy, and y'all know why he feels guilty, age difference, obviously. Stacy, solid in her faith, seems undeterred by the sparks that fly when her and Christopher are in the same room. But an instant proposal puts them in close proximity, and a friendship immediately ignites. Join the journey as Christopher navigates his guilt and Stacy fully walks in God's will. This book is filled with friendship, family, love, and lots of prayers. So pick you up a copy of Only the Beginning on my website at determinepublishing.com. All right. Thank you for joining me tonight. But before I go, I'm going to answer a few questions in the chat. So give me just a few minutes and I will read those. So the first question is, can the aunt stay too? That's a great question. So the aunt is actually, as you read the book, the aunt is actually in another state. So she's at home and the American Cancer Society, as well as a nurse, I'll tell you, you'll find that out a little bit later, but there's a nurse that helps the aunt be taken care of while Sydney is in college. So the aunt is actually in another state, so she's not able to stay with them. I guess possibly she could, but all of her doctors, her medical professionals, her nurse, all of them are in her home state. So that's where she's probably gonna stay to receive the care that she needs. There's a reply from my mom in response to me asking about staying with a person of the opposite sex. My mom noted, it depends on how long I have known and my gut feeling, and still that may not be enough. I totally agree with that. I have had a male roommate. It was actually 4 of us staying in one house some years ago. These were during my college years, y'all. There were 4 of us staying in one house. It was 3 females and 1 male. We all roomed together. It worked out fine. We had no issues. We just lived together. We sometimes ate together when our schedules allowed. We had activities together when our schedule allowed. We went to church together. So it worked out, okay for, I think we were with each other for a year, and then our life changed, and then we went about our separate ways. So it worked for us. I've never had a roommate of the opposite sex with just me and him. But again, I have to agree with my mom. It kind of depends on how long we've known each other. It would depend on the nature of our relationship. And again, I would definitely have to pray like, God, is this okay? Because like when we were roommates with the gentleman, we all knew each other from church. So we was like, we got this big old house, y'all. Let's split this rent 4 ways. And so we did that. And again, it worked out very well. So yeah. Now I'm gonna stop right there. Because y'all don't have to know all my life. So I'm gonna stop right there. So yes, I'm gonna stay there. I'm gonna stop right there. All right. So thank you again for joining me for the 2021 book study with author Stephanie Humphrey. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday for our Be Free Ministry Bible studies. And then for the next 2 Thursdays, and then the 3rd Thursday we have Been Stay with Stephanie, and the 4th Thursday we will be reading excerpts from because that's my bookmark. I was doing a little reading myself from Only the Beginning. All right, you all, take care and be blessed. And I'll see you next time. Don't forget, determinepublishing.com to get your copy. All right, take care now. Bye-bye. Y'all know how I am. I'm having technical difficulties. So I know y'all still see me, and that's okay. I'm gonna keep working it out. You know what, you all, since this is still going on, I have been thinking about a theme song for the book study. So if I come up with one, I'll do some singing next month. If not, then it just have to be what it's gonna be. All right. Okay, I think that's it. See y'all later. Bye bye.